Hey everyone, my name is Jennifer Woods and welcome to my channel. In this episode, I will discuss how The Woman of the Hour is the most blatant attempt to mold a true story into a Hollywood 2024 narrative that I've probably ever seen. And right in time for an election season, but we won't go there. Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by my channel. My name is Jennifer Woods, and today I'm going to discuss the new Netflix thriller, The Woman of the Hour, about Cheryl Bradshaw, a lady who won a date with serial killer Rodney Alcala on a popular dating show back in the 70s. Was anyone else really excited to watch Anna Kendrick's directorial debut? I've been waiting years for this. I was already familiar with the dating game killer case and was curious to see how this movie would tell that story. I have to say it had its strong points, but overall I'm not really satisfied with the final product. I understand they had to take a lot of creative licenses with the facts, but I came away feeling that this was mostly fiction, and I'm bothered by the fact that they made no mention of some of his more well-known victims, such as Robin Samsoe, the 12-year-old abducted from Huntington Beach in 1979 after the dating game episode aired. Right before the final credits, it says that he killed a 12-year-old but makes no mention of her name. And maybe they changed and omitted names out of respect for the victim's privacy, but I just feel that's a weird thing to do in 2024 when anyone can go online and find this info anyway. And it feels a little bit like giving the killer the glory and resigning the victims to anonymity. But that's my thoughts on the matter. By the way, I also have another reason for wanting to review this movie, aside from being an avid watcher of true crime. Anna Kendrick grew up just a few minutes away from me and was actually in a play, Annie, with my grandmother in the early 90s. I tried out for that play as well, but didn't get in, unfortunately. I did know several of the people who did get cast alongside of her, though. Kendrick was also apparently well acquainted with a guy I was friends with as a little kid. His mother is still close to my mother. For the longest time, my grandmother was always talking about that little Anna Kendrick girl and what she was up to. She dragged me to the theater to see Camp in 2003 because the little Kendrick girl was in it. But then when Anna became famous, my grandmother kind of turned on her because she was too Hollywood now. Old ladies can certainly be a fickle audience. Anyway, on to my review. If you haven't already, please subscribe to my channel so that you don't miss any of my new content and so that you can say you are subscribed to the channel of Anna Kendrick's childhood bestie. Just kidding. I don't think I ever actually met her. I just heard lots of talk about her. Small town, you know how it goes. The movie opens with a 1977 murder of a young woman named Sarah who's pregnant and has been abandoned by her ex, who is the father of her unborn child. Rodney is taking pictures of her in Wyoming out in the middle of nowhere while she tells him her sad story and he offers support. Well, up until the moment he kills her, that is. This woman is clearly based on real victim Christine Thornton. I like how we see her vulnerability and hear a little bit about her backstory. It's a very human moment for her. The movie shows a little of what Alcala does to her. It shows him rendering her unconscious and then reviving her only to kill her. This is based on what we have been told of his real-life MO. Then the scene switches to Cheryl Bradshaw, played by Kendrick, auditioning in front of two a-hole men in Hollywood in 1978. They're saying mean things about her in whispers, or in low voices. I don't think they're even trying to hide what they're saying. As they're sitting right in front of her. So they're saying mean things about her as she stands a few feet away. When they ask her for her age, she evades answering the question. She does say she's not comfortable with nudity. That appears to be the end of the conversation as far as they're concerned. She is feeling dejected and hopeless. She comes home to her apartment where a male friend is asking her how it went. She's ready to give up when she gets a call from her agent, Helen. Helen signed her up to appear on a show called The Dating Game. Cheryl is disgusted when she watches an episode of the game show. It's frivolous drivel. But her male friend convinces her to go through with it, and she reassures herself that it will be a good opportunity by telling herself that Sally Field appeared on the show, so it can't be all that bad. From what I'm reading online, little is known about Cheryl Bradshaw. We know from her introduction on the dating game that she was a teacher in Arizona, but beyond that, I'm not sure how much we really do know, so it sounds like a lot of what was portrayed in the movie is imagined. Now we're introduced to a runaway named Amy in San Gabriel in 1979. It's Valentine's Day. She gets kicked off the park bench where she tries to get some sleep. She steals coins from a machine at a laundromat, and she eventually comes into contact with none other than Alcala, who convinces her to pose for photos. There was a very similar killer named Christopher Wilder, and called the Beauty Queen Killer in the 80s, who lured victims by posing as a photographer. That case inspired the TV movie Easy Prey, starring Gerald McRaney and Shawnee Smith. So just mentioning that. Obviously, Rodney Alcala is based on Rodney Alcala, but I just wanted to mention there was another serial killer who had a similar MO. Now we're back to Cheryl. She's at the studio where the dating game is being filmed. She gets all the gossip from the women who do hair and makeup. Ed Burke, who is the host of the show in the movie, is introduced as a racist and sexist POS. By the way, I am describing the way he is portrayed in the movie, since this is a review of the movie. In real life, that was not his name. I don't know who he was or what he was like in real life. Now we're in New York in 1971, being introduced to a young woman named Charlie, who is moving into a new apartment. We are given a sense of Charlie's yearnings for something more. She is not completely happy with where she has ended up, but it's just one thing in particular, she says, that gives us this impression. She says that she wants to have a view of the sky. And I appreciated the humanity and the mundane annoyances, like spilling paint all over herself and washing it off in the shower, or missing the movers' initial knocks so that when she finally does meet them at the door, they don't have time to bring in her furniture. As a result, she is dependent on the kindness of a stranger who doesn't end up being kind at all. That stranger, of course, is photographer Rodney Alcala. It goes to show you how a seemingly everyday inconvenience can turn into the reason you don't live to see another day, and that's just even more heartbreaking to think about. Charlie is a stewardess and appears to be based on victim Cornelia Crilly. In the movie, Rodney tells her about his connection to Roman Polanski, the director of Rosemary's Baby. And he was accused of assaulting a 13-year-old in the 70s, so he had his own sordid history. I have to say that I'm not too impressed with the actor Daniel Zavato, who played Rodney Alcala. It's not that he's a bad actor or anything, he just didn't look like the character. Rodney Alcala had like thick brown hair to his shoulders. He kind of reminded me a little of maybe like a Jim Morrison type, like his hairstyle. I really can't think of who he reminds me of, but he reminds me of someone. I keep thinking like Donny Osmond, only creepier, or like someone you might see in a band like Foreigner or Three Dog Night or 10cc, a 60s or 70s band, as opposed to Daniel Zavato, who looked totally 90s grunge. So very different vibe I was getting from both of them. Also, Daniel Zavato, his personality just didn't remind me at all of how I believe Rodney Alcala acted. Just my impression that I got of him. Likewise, Anna Kendrick was a weird choice to play Cheryl Bradshaw. But Hollywood has been known to take actors and make them look just like the characters that they're playing. Anna Kendrick looked nothing like Cheryl Bradshaw. She acted nothing like Cheryl Bradshaw acted on that episode of the dating game that I saw. I feel like they were going for something completely different, even if it was false. So yeah, Charlie ends up being a murder victim of Rodney, and we see most of the attack through the skylight. I don't think that the movie really goes overboard showing the violence, which is good. I feel like it doesn't focus on that. That's not the focus of the movie, so, I do want to just let you know, it's not particularly graphic, but it is still disturbing. We see Alcala photograph Charlie as she's dying, and that is juxtaposed with a camera flash, and Cheryl is on the stage now, getting ready to appear on the dating game show. So now Ed Burke, the host, is introducing Cheryl to the crowd, and he's making all these crude innuendos and doing that whole thing. And then he introduces the bachelors. He introduces Bachelor 1, Bachelor 2. By the way, in real life, Rodney was Bachelor 1. In this movie, he's Bachelor number 3. And I think the reason they made that change is because they wanted to delay the surprise. When we find out Rodney is one of the bachelors. I mean, we knew he was one of the bachelors. That's what this movie is about. But still, I think they wanted to draw out that suspenseful moment. And then the light shines down on him, and it's Rodney. It's that guy that we saw killing all those girls. There's a woman in the audience named Laura who sees him and who recognizes him. She's met him before. So Laura's not based on a real person. From what I'm reading online, she's based on an amalgam of people who came forward and tried to warn the police about Rodney, but were just brushed off. I don't remember any specific incidences of that in real life. What I do know is that Rodney was captured for some pretty heinous crimes, and the police did take him seriously as a predator. It's just that the sentences he was given were light, because back then they didn't punish these kinds of predators the way that now we know they should have. So he was given very light sentences. So that was the problem. But I kind of get the feeling that Hollywood didn't want to shine a light on that. They wanted to make it seem more like sexism and, men of authority not taking women seriously was the problem, instead of light prison sentences. I mean, it's always possible. There are things in this case that I missed, but I kind of got the feeling that the movie wanted to make its own statement, and it wasn't so much concerned about the facts of the case and was more concerned about how to make this statement about believing women. I'm not going to give too many details about Laura's backstory. I'll leave that as a surprise for people who want to watch the movie. I will say that it is very Hollywoodized. It's not at all what happened in real life. Once again, Laura's not based on a real person, but she does have this little backstory with Rodney, and she gets really sick seeing him on stage. And she has to get up and leave. And I want to add that she doesn't actually know Rodney personally. She's just seen him before. So she's pretty sure that the guy she sees on stage is Rodney, but she's not 100% sure. So there is always that possibility that she could be an unreliable witness. But of course, the movie glosses over that. Of course, she's right, because witnesses are always right. So I don't want to spoil the movie for people. I will say that in the movie, Cheryl gets tired of asking the bachelors these ditzy pre-scripted questions. So she decides to ask questions that are a little more intelligent and that will really keep the contestants on their toes. The first two bachelors make a complete fool of themselves, but surprise, surprise, Rodney comes across as a caring, sensitive soul. This is total fiction. Cheryl, in real life, went all out with a dirty little schoolgirl routine, and I can hear her grating voice in my nightmares. No offense to the real woman, I know she was probably putting on an act for our sick delight. In real life, Rodney was right there in the gutter with her. I don't get why these modern movies always have to make real life more palatable to the new generation. Why not just show it as it is? If you can't do that, then maybe don't make movies about life in the 70s. Not to mention that one of the creepiest things about watching that old episode of The Dating Game is to see how obvious it was, just by the way he was interacting with Cheryl. It was so obvious that there was something deeply wrong with him, but because, that was the whole purpose of the show, to kind of be crass and crude, it just went unnoticed. So Laura talks to a security officer at the studio to sound the alarm on Rodney. He's like, yeah, tell it to someone who cares. So he brings her upstairs and leaves her waiting around for the series producer, George Eliot, to show up. Interesting choice of a name there. Didn't George Eliot write Middlemarch and Silas Marner? Anyway, a custodian eventually shows up, and when Laura says she's waiting to talk with the producer, George Eliot, he's like, oh, summer child, there's no producer here named George Eliot. I thought he was about to start schooling her on English literature. George Eliot is a female author whose real name is Marianne Evans. But no, turns out there's also a custodian called George Eliot, and he's that guy. So she's clearly been given the brush off. So my understanding from what I read online is that nobody really knows what happened behind the scenes between Cheryl and Rodney. What we do know is that something happened to make Cheryl back out of going on that date with him. She was just getting these icky feelings from him. And it could have been something, relatively minor that he said or did, that of course wouldn't have been minor because he's a serial killer, but, to the average person from the outside not knowing that, what he said or did could have been like, did I read that right? Is it really that big a deal? Or it could have been something that was a very big deal because this was the 70s and women maybe weren't as emboldened to speak up. So maybe he did something pretty bad. We don't know. So the movie kind of has to speculate and fictionalize that whole encounter. For the most part, I think the movie did a good job with that. I just feel like it did come across as heavily dramatized, and I'm not sure if it was that dramatic in real life. So we don't know. We don't know. So we're left to wonder, did we just get the Hollywood treatment, or was it something far worse? Also, in the movie, the couple won a trip to Carmel. That's not at all what happened in real life. For instance, one of the things that they were going to do on their date in real life was have tennis lessons. And I'm sure the whole thing was going to be chaperoned. In the movie, it kind of makes it seem like, now that they've won a date together, they're pretty much on their own. From what I've read online, Cheryl passed away. So that's sad to know that she has passed away. Rodney Alcala passed away, not as sad. He died in 2021 while in prison. So now I'm just going to go over some information that I found online, like on Wikipedia and Crime Library. I'm not going to give any more details about the movie. I will leave that for you to find out if you haven't watched the movie yet. I know it's still a new release. I also rewatched the dating game episode in question on YouTube in order to complete this review. Rodney Alcala was ultimately sentenced to death for the murders of 12-year-old Robin Samso, 18-year-old Jill Barcombe, 27-year-old Georgia Wickstead, 32-year-old Charlotte Lamb, and 21-year-old Jill Parento. All 5 were killed in the late 70s. He was convicted of Robin's murder soon after she was killed, but the other 4 victims had to wait years for justice. When it comes to how many murders he actually committed that we just don't know about, I've heard the number 130 thrown around, but who knows? He was also sentenced for 2 additional murders in New York. There were also charges in Wyoming that never went to trial. His conviction was overturned twice in the case of Robin Samso, but he was resentenced to death both times and died in prison in 2021. Up until around 2021, when a woman named Morgan Rowan came forward and claimed to have been assaulted by Rodney in the summer of 1968, his first known victim was 8-year-old Tally Shapiro in September 1968. He kidnapped her while she was walking to school. A witness saw her get into his car and thought it was suspicious, so he followed behind and then directed the police to Alcala's apartment. When the police arrived, they found Tally near death. She had been violated and assaulted. She survived, but Rodney had escaped the apartment, and so he was on the run. He ended up at NYU as John Berger, Berger. He got a counselor job at a children's camp in New Hampshire in 1971, where he spelled his last name Burger instead of Berger. In 1971, a 23-year-old woman named Cornelia Crilly, who appears to be the inspiration for the Charlie character, was killed in her apartment in Manhattan in 1971. She was a stewardess. The part about him helping her move into her new apartment appears to be based on fact. He was a wanted man until 2 kids at the camp where he worked recognized his face on a wanted poster. He only got 3 years for Tally's assault because Tally was unable to testify against him, which made the attempted murder charge hard to pursue in court. I don't understand this since the police were also witnesses, but there you go. He got out in 1974 and ended up back in police custody for assaulting a young teen. He was back on the streets again in 1976. He is believed to be responsible for the 1977 murder of Ellen Hover, a 23-year-old whose godfathers were Dean Martin and Sammy Davis Jr. He was on the dating game in 1978. Cheryl selected him in part because of a crass banana joke he made. She did not end up going on the date with him, though, because she didn't like the energy he was giving her backstage. Robin Samso was the 12-year-old girl who was murdered by Rodney Alcala in 1979 while on her way to dance class in Huntington Beach, California. He had tried to photograph her and her friend earlier at the beach, so that's why the police began searching for this mystery photographer. It reminds me of Bundy at Lake Sammamish and the way that many people reported a suspicious man in an arm sling on the day 2 women went missing at the lake. In Alcala's case, many witnesses saw him at the beach around the time of the disappearance, trying to entice young girls into modeling for him. He left behind a large stash of photos which police have tried to connect to further victims. The runaway Amy in the movie appears to have been inspired by a survivor referred to as Monique, according to crimelibrary.org and Wikipedia. The actress Autumn Bess did a great job bringing this young woman to life. Sarah, at the beginning of the movie, appears to be based on the murder victim Christine Thornton, who was linked to Rodney through photographs he took. Her body was found in 1982 and identified in 2015. Other suspected victims are Joyce Gaunt, Antoinette Whitaker, Pamela Lamson, and Cherry Greenman. 2 of them were teens under the age of 18. A woman named Morgan Rowan claims to be a surviving victim. She came forward around 2021. So that's all that I have on Rodney Alcala. That's all I'm going to say on this movie. Overall, I would give this movie, I think I would give it 3 stars because I really did not like how they fictionalized so much of it and left so much out. But other people who watch it might feel differently. They might feel like they were able to enhance the message of the story by lying. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so overall, I would give this movie a 3. It's definitely worth checking out on Netflix. In all fairness, it was really interesting what they did with the story. I just wish that if they were going to fictionalize it that much, that they made it just completely fiction. Like, they could have made it about a different, like, fictional serial killer. They could have made it not the dating game, but they could have made it something more recent, like, a reality show. There were other options. But I feel like the reason that they went with Rodney Alcala is because there is this appeal of true crime, and I think they wanted people to watch this movie because they were a fan of true crime. So I think that's the reason why they made it a true story, but then fictionalized it as opposed to making it just fiction. And I have to say, anything that Anna Kendrick appears in, I'm probably going to watch. I'm not a huge fan of her, but, I do have that connection to her from the past, so I'm just drawn to her movies like A Moth to a Flame, to use a really bad cliche. Anyway, have a great day, everyone. Take care.